first of all, I'd just like to say, just kind of a reminder, Arvada became a charter city back in 1963. And there were several changes to the charter approved over the years. But the first comprehensive review was conducted in 1991. And among other provisions that were approved by the voters that year was 13.3, which is the section that calls for the comprehensive review by a citizen committee every 10 years. So that's why we are together. I want to say just a couple introductory things. This is really a council-driven process. Would not have to be, but that's the procedure that we followed the last two times in 2001 and 2011, is that we started with the charter provisions that were forwarded to us by City Council. And so we're going to do that again. And of course, whatever issues, whatever recommendations we make about charter issues, we'll go back to the council. The council will decide whether to accept or not accept or modify anything that we recommend or don't recommend. And we're starting with, I think it's 8 issues that the council has referred to us, but it's also possible that they may decide not to, even if we recommended all 6 or all 8 go to the ballot, the council could decide, no, let's not. Let's only put on 4 this year, and we'll do some more next year. So that doesn't mean that the process is necessarily ended in November. It could go on beyond that. Another element that we've got incorporated into the citizen committee is public input, public comment. And that's not required by the charter amendment, by the charter language. But that's something, again, that we had in 2001 and 2011. And we wanted to have that again this year so that there's the opportunity for people to bring issues to the committee. In 2011, we had 2 provisions that were brought to the committee. One was kind of a mistake in interpretation, and so there was not the need to really consider it by the committee. But the other was accepted by the committee and recommended to the council in the same spirit that was that the citizen had brought it to us. And so we're hoping that there may be some citizen input, although at this point we understand that there's not going to be any tonight. Nobody has signed up for the citizen input, but if that happens, we'll be all set for it. So what we want to do tonight, I guess, one of the first things is just kind of self-introductions. And we want to just, of course, keep them very short because that could be the whole meeting if we took a lengthy time to introduce ourselves. So I'm thinking, 30 seconds worth ought to be enough. And I'll start and you can time me, see if we get under 30 seconds. My name is Mark McGough. I've been a resident of Arvada for about 27 years. I've served on the city council for 3 terms. And I served on the charter committee in 2001 and 2011. In 2011, I served as co-chair of the committee. The chair was Don Allard at that time. So the reason I accepted appointment to this position is actually I asked for it. I asked the council before I went off the council in November of 2019 if I might have the honor of chairing this committee, because I've tried to stay pretty close to the charter throughout my time that I've been involved with the city. Okay, so, and Barb, are you gonna call out the names so that we can go alphabetically?
Sure, I can do that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. John Marriott.
Okay, that's not alphabetically, but I
We
think
always
that's appropriate.
stop, but
I think it's appropriate.
You surprised me, Barb. Thank you. I am John Marriott. I grew up in Arvada and I serve on the Arvada City Council currently. I was first elected in 2013 and re-elected in 2017. Very thankful for Mr. McGough for being willing to chair this committee for us.
And Lauren Simpson.
Thanks, Barb. I am Lauren Simpson. Along with John, I serve on the Arvada City Council. I have lived in Arvada for 7 years, from a small town in rural Texas originally. And I love Arvada very, very much. Can't envision living anywhere else at this point. This is now home. And I was first elected in November of 19. So this is my first foray into the charter review, and I am really excited to get to do this with all of you. And I am backing up Mr. McGough through his noble leadership. And I guess this is the second time I've gotten to follow in his shoes, and they are always such large shoes to fill.
Okay.
Okay, now we'll dive into alphabetically. So Preston.
Good evening. I'm Preston Branagh. I'm an Arvada native. My parents lived in some of the apartment buildings right behind the currently now vacant Kmart building when I was born. And so glad to get to participate with this group. I'm a dad. I have 2 daughters that are now both off in college. And I'm an attorney, have an office in the Arvada area there too.
Kyoko.
Hi. I was waiting for that. So I am Kyoko Chenholz. I live in Arvada. I'm actually going on 2 years and I love it. By profession, I am a GIS analyst and I worked in local government for about 7 years now. And the municipality I actually work for has a charter as well. So I understand how important that can be when decision times come. And I'm just happy to be able to help it and provide feedback to the charter for the city I live in.
Thank you. And Shelley.
Hi there, everybody. Shelley Cook. Moved to Arvada in 1983, live in the Old Town area. I spent 3 terms total on city council, 2 terms at large, and then 1 term in district rep in John Marriott's district, District 3. And just really glad to be able to work with you on this important thing.
Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. Representative Lindsay Doherty. This is my first time being an elected anything, so I'm happy to be here. We are starting again back in session next Tuesday. I've been finalizing all of my bills. I have a background in juvenile and family law, so they're mostly to do with those subject areas. If anyone is interested, I'd love to talk to you offline, and it's great to see you guys here. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Sharon.
Hi, I'm Sharon Davis. I moved to Arvada in 2004 when I married my husband. Used to live in Lakewood. I've been in Colorado off and on since the mid-70s. I'm an Air Force brat, and I'm also an avid runner, and I get around Arvada a lot, and I'm really excited about being a part of this. So thank you.
Thank you. Bob.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bob Dyer. I've lived in Arvada since 1959 and served 4 terms as District 4 City Council rep. And my connection to the charter actually goes back to 1991 when I led a citizen initiative drive to convert one of the at-large seats to an elected mayor spot. Before 1991, the mayor was always selected among the council members. And we thought about that point, Arvada was around 90,000 people and should have an elected mayor. So I led that drive. And so hopefully I won't have to fight to keep it that way. Thanks.
Ken.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ken Fellman. I've been in Arvada since 1987, raised my kids here with my wife, Jill. And I served on city council for 6 years. I served as mayor for 8 years. I'm also a local government attorney, so I actually had done some work for the city of Arvada before I was an elected official, and I am now doing work for the city of Arvada after I'm an elected official. So I see Rachel Morris right in the middle of my screen here. I work for her now, and I also am a member of the Arvada Center Board of Directors. I'm the chair of that board, and I also serve on the AIDA board. So I have a lot of involvement in the city. I love the city. It's always going to be our home. And I am on this committee. I was involved in charter committee work as an elected official, and I'm here tonight because Mayor Williams asked. And when he asks, I usually say yes.
Thank you. Vanessa?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Vanessa Kendrick. I am also a resident of Arvada for about 8 years now. I'm a real estate agent here in Arvada and work surrounding areas, of course. I second Ken's comments, love this community very much. I'm also involved with the Arvada Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, the AIDA Retention Committee, as well as the Two Ponds Preservation Foundation, to name a few. And I'm really excited to be here tonight. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. T.O.?
Hey, I'm T.O. Owens. I've been in Arvada in 22 years now, I guess. So time or two. I've just been a rabble rouser probably for the most part for the last 20 years. And I'm excited to be a part of this committee.
Thank you. Jeremiah?
Hi, my name is Jeremiah. I've lived in Arvada for 2 years. I'm a dentist who opened my practice last week up in Northwest Arvada in the Candelas area, and lived all around Arvada, Lakewood, Golden, and Boulder. And now I'm just finally settled down in Arvada and excited to be part of this.
Thank you. Ed?
Sorry about that. Ed Rothschild, resident here for about 25 years and a small business owner here for 25 years. Served on the Planning Commission for 3 terms. Also serve on the board of the Chamber of Commerce. Pleasure to be here, and I was in part involved to keep T.O. out of trouble.
Anna?
Hi, I'm Anna Smith, and I've lived here for about 5 years in Arvada. I moved here from Arizona. David Jones asked if I would like to help out our community, and I said absolutely, and so here I am.
Thank you. Lisa?
I'm assuming you mean Lisa Smith, right?
Yes.
Lisa Smith here, former military police turned social worker. Really excited to be here. I currently work with Team Rubicon. We do disaster recovery and response, primarily with veterans, and current Arvada City Council at-large candidate.
Thank you. Mike?
I was also asked to keep T.O. out of trouble. Mike Stahl, as of this month, I think I've been in my house in Arvada now for 20 years. I got involved with the Arvada community through the Chamber of Commerce, serving on board of directors there for 6 years. And now I am on the board of directors of our Arvada Jefferson Kiwanis, and I am also looking forward to serving on this committee.
Thank you. Brett?
Hi, my name is Brett Vernon. I'm a commercial banker by trade, and I've been a resident of Arvada for the last 7 years or so. Love the city. I spent the last 2 or 3 years annoying city council about the Jefferson Parkway, so I have absolutely no idea why I was invited to this. But I'm very much looking forward to it, and Bill Ray says hello.
Thank you. David?
Hello?
You want to go ahead, Nancy? Katie?
Sure. Hi. Good evening, everybody. Brett, you're here to keep me in line. I don't know if David Jones told you that part.
I thought I was here to help out keep John Marriott or TO in line, but it's all about the other way around. Katie Winter, fun fact, when I lived in New York City until 2013, Childish Gambino, Donald Glover worked for me in my residence hall. I played hockey as a child. I joined the Chamber of Commerce because Cammie Welch said, you're going to join the chamber. It wasn't like a question, it was more of a statement. And I've been harassing City Council as well ever since I got here as fast as I could in 2013, but I haven't told anyone back home in New York and New Jersey how amazing Arvada is, so you don't need to worry. We're keeping my mother-in-law back on Long Island. Really a pleasure to be here with everybody. I can't wait to serve with you, Mr. McGough, Lauren, Bob Dyer, Ken Feldman, I mean, there's just so many people here that I love and admire so much. Ed, nice beard, Ed, and great to see you, Preston. So thanks for the honor and the privilege, David. This is going to be a great time.
Thanks for your energy, Katie. Nancy? Okay, Nancy, let's make sure that you can have, give me just 1 second. You're still muted.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you, Nancy.
Okay. Zoom keeps muting me. My name is Nancy Young. I was born and raised in Arvada. I've been here just a few years longer than Bob Dyer. I am a frequent observer of City Council. I attend, for the last 10 years, I've attended just about every council meeting, planning commission meeting, urban renewal board meeting. I've been involved in a number of other citizen committees, including the Land Development Code. And this one, I think, is just the most exciting of all.
Thank you, Nancy. Lori?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Lori Gillis. I'm the Deputy City Manager. I've been with the city about 7 years, and thank you so much for your service. And hopefully we'll have fun and knock this out and make some improvements.
Rachel?
Hi, I'm Rachel Morris. I'm the city attorney. My first time working for the city was back a little over 15 years ago as a law clerk. I never forgot about it, loved the job so much. When I found an opportunity to come back after being in private practice for a while in 2017, absolutely did. It is an amazing job, absolutely love it, and I am so excited to be part of this process.
Thank you. Kristen?
Hi, I'm Kristen Rush. I have worked for the city 26 years, 5 years as city clerk, and I'm happy to be a part of this process.
And I'm the last one. I've been in Arvada all my life. I've been with the city for 13 years, and I work in the city manager's office, and I'm the one who sends you all of the information, and just want to offer anytime you guys have any questions or need anything, just reach out. I'm more than happy to help.
Well, thank you all. What an amazing array of talents and experiences we have. I want to really thank the city staff whom I've worked with over the last few months as we've kind of put together the format, the structure for this endeavor. It's been great fun, and I think it should move along pretty quickly and pretty easily, especially with having input from all of you as we go along. So I think, Barb, if we can show the slide about home rule, can we get that one done?
Kristen is actually sharing her screen, Mark, so when you want her to advance a slide, just let her know.
Okay, well, it's this one that basically we talked about a little bit, but what was adopted in 1991 And I didn't realize that Bob Dyer had input to that year. That was a pivotal year. Those were the biggest changes in 1991. If you look at the footnotes in your charter that was provided to you, you'll see that a very large number of the provisions of the charter were adopted in 2001. I'm sorry, in 1991. And then in 2001 was the first charter review. So this is the charge that we have. I've reviewed several other city charters over the last 6 months or so, and I've not found another city that has a provision that mandates a comprehensive review. So we are, as far as I can tell, and I've looked at about maybe 15 different charters from around Colorado, I think we are unique in having this provision that says that there will be a citizen committee, and this will happen in a comprehensive review every 10 years. So congratulations and thanks for being part of this. And I should have mentioned before, I served on it in 2001, and at that year, that was at the request of Ken Feldman. So thank you, Ken, for getting me involved in this. Okay, we can go to the next slide, I believe. Okay, we'll move on. Here's all the names, and I think you've got those, the city staff. And then this is what we want next. One more slide. Okay, I borrowed a few things from the Colorado Municipal League to just say, what is the charter? Just giving a little bit of background to it. Municipalities lacking home rule status are limited to those powers that have been granted by the state. And that's referred to as a statutory city. There are many state laws that govern non-charter cities. And that has to do with when you have elections, how you handle finances, lots of things that are governed by state law. So when we went into this in 1963, but we became we wrote our own rules, our own constitution. But just the dates, 3 significant ones: 1902, citizens in cities of the first and second class were allowed to adopt home rule under some form under the provisions of the Constitution. In 1912, it again amplified things for home rule cities. In 1970, they extended the right to home rule to citizens of every municipality. At one point back many years, if you were under 2,000 population, which encompassed a lot of the small towns, of course, in our state, you were allowed to have your own charter. You were automatically a statutory city. So the Article 20 of the Colorado Constitution reserves both structural and functional home rule powers to municipalities and the full right of several government in local and municipal matters to citizens. Interesting. And we are a citizen committee. The next slide. Okay, the benefits of the home rule, of course, are that it gives power to the home rules, that provides flexibility. Bob Dyer mentioned that in 1991, we began to elect the mayor directly, where before that, the mayor was elected by members of the council. So everybody was elected at large, and then the mayor was elected from among the elected council people. So that was it gave us that flexibility. That's when we got the 4 districts and when we got the 2 at-large seats and the mayor's seat. Of course, it allows quicker response time to emergency situations, so we don't have to wait for a legislative process, so we can write our own rules and have. And home rule municipalities are not required to follow state statutes in matters of local and municipal concern. And it just gives us the freedom to do business pretty much the way we want to do them. Obviously, there are some limitations, but there's a lot of allowances by the state. And so we're one of the statutory cities, and I've forgotten how many there are in Colorado, but all of the cities of any size are charter cities now. Okay, the next slide.
Excuse me, Mark.
Yes.
Sharon would like to know, does Arvada have a definition of citizen?
I don't think so. There's a question has arisen in the past about the definition of resident. There's lots of dispute about the definition of a resident of the city, but I don't think there's a definition of citizen of the city. In fact, I'd be pretty definite that there's not we don't have any place a definition of citizen.
Yeah, that's accurate from my viewpoint as well. It's the term is referenced in our code, but never defined.
Right. And resident is defined as is used in various places, including in the charter, but we do not have a definition of resident. And it's for lots of reasons, that's a very difficult definition to pin down, and has been the subject of some litigation right here in the city of Arvada. What does citizenship mean? So it's a tough one. Or what does resident mean? Not citizen. We don't have a definition at all of that. Okay. Again, the benefits. It allows us to legislate with confidence on any matters of local concern. It enhances citizen control, interest, involvement, pride in their government, the embodiment of the principle that the best government is the one the closest to the people. So that's what we're about at this point. So, okay, I think we can move to the next slide, Kristen. Okay, I just want to run over the process and procedures. This is a little bit different from what we've used before, but we've got them here. But I just want you to know that we will have an agenda before each meeting, and that'll be sent out no later than 5 days prior. The business items, when we're in the meeting here, we'll try to proceed by consensus if possible. If we can't have consensus, then at least we'll want to report to the council that so many members are in favor of this, and other members were not in favor, and preferably to tell them what they were in favor of. But it won't be a strict vote as has been done sometimes in the past. We'll fully discuss each of the charter provisions forwarded by the City Council, and that's 8 of them at this point, as well as any issues identified by committee members or the public. So that means that you as members, all of us as members, can bring issues forward if we wish to as we get into this. And we'll provide a summary of the discussion of each item in the final oral and written reports to the council. Requests of staff members for information or research will be at the direction of the committee. So we're saying that staff will not respond to requests by individuals. So if there's an issue you want to bring up and it's something we need more research on or direction from the city attorney's office, we'll talk about that, and it'll be a committee decision on whether to forward that on to the staff. Number 5, meetings. The intent is that they'll start and end at the designated times. If we get into good discussion and we want to extend it, if there's agreement of those in attendance, we'll do that. But otherwise, we'll end by 8 o'clock at latest. Okay, the next slide. Finish these out. Okay, and if it turns out that you cannot attend one of these scheduled meetings, you're very welcome to either call in or send something in writing so that we can consider it. We do want to have all of the input from all the committee members. And lastly, for the public input, we'll set aside 30 minutes for public comment at the beginning of each meeting. and only Arvada residents will be allowed to address the committee, and individual statements be limited to 5 minutes. And then if we do have public comment, it's appropriate for us to ask questions for understanding or clarification, but we won't enter into discussion with the member of the public at that point. What we may do, however, is refer whatever the issue is that the citizen has brought to us to staff and then bring it back at the next meeting so that we can move that along pretty well. Okay, I think we're ready to move to the next to public comment. And am I right? Is it still the case, Barb, that we have no public comment?
That is correct.
Okay. So we'll move right ahead then to the, we can start on the issues that have been brought to us by the council, and we can work through a few of those, and you know, we can just keep right on moving. So the first issue for consideration is Article 3.1, the council term beginning first meeting after the election. So Barb or Kristen, you want to pull that one up on the screen, 3.1? You can.
Mr. McGough?
Yes.
I understand Nancy Young had her hand up. We had heard before the meeting we weren't having public comment, but do you want to check with Nancy Young at this point?
Sure.
Yes, Mr. McGough, can you hear me?
Sure can hear you. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Several citizens have brought an issue to me, and I promised that I would bring it to the committee. So I'm not sure if you want to do that now or later.
I think it would be most appropriate to do that one later, Nancy, so that
okay.
Just keep the public comments separated from, and you'll certainly have the opportunity to bring any issues to the full committee.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so if we can take a look at the issue, Kristen, and about the beginning of the council term. Okay. We've decided not to put up the whole write-up that we have, but you can see that the current charter language says that the term for the mayor and council elected at any regular municipal election shall commence at the first regular meeting following the election at 7:00 p.m. For the last many, many years, that has meant the Monday following the Tuesday election, the first Tuesday in November. And it's been suggested that maybe the language be amended to say the date for the term of the mayor or council members will commence at the second regular meeting following the election. Does anybody want to speak to that? Perhaps Lauren or John?
I would be happy to speak to that one. So as the person who very most recently went through this, I can say that 6 days from the time you really don't find out if you've won the election until Wednesday morning. And then it becomes a kind of 4 or 5 day whirlwind. And then you find yourself sat on Monday. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a little crazy in most of our neighboring cities. I believe many of them wait until that next Monday. So I would be in favor of changing it to the second regular meeting just to give new council members a little more time to adjust. And in addition, in the case of a very close election that may involve a recount, city staff and elections officials more time to be able to figure out and certify the correct winner. So I think that could be a very appropriate thing as well, but certainly open to feedback. I don't think it's necessarily a problem the way it is. It just might be a slight improvement to do it the other way.
So, Mr. Marriott, do you have anything on that, on this
Yeah,
particular?
so that was the general idea behind proposing a change like that is that in the event that we had a close election where a winner wasn't determined by the first meeting after the election, that having a little more time may be warranted. I view it as a small change. I believe we have not experienced that yet in Arvada, where we had such a tightly contested election that we didn't have a new council member seated at the first meeting. So I think this is good to be looking forward at these things that could possibly be problems, but I wouldn't rank this as a giant concern, just because it's, again, something we haven't yet faced, and I think unlikely to be a big problem, but it's good for us to review and propose a change if we think that's the appropriate thing.
How about any of the other former council members? Do you have any thoughts on this particular one?
Yes, I'm concerned about a close election and what the procedure would be for seating a council member. If it's one of those that's contested and takes forever to recount, and you don't have good certifiable results until mid-December, what would be the procedure under the, if we just made the one change to the second meeting?
Well, it's perhaps in raising the question, there might be a proposed response to that, to say how might that be handled. I can tell you that the Boulder Charter addresses it specifically to say that in the case of a contested election, it will, the swearing in, and they do it during the day, they do it at 10 o'clock in the morning on a given day beyond the date of the, when the disputed election is resolved. That's the only charter that I've read that makes allowance for that. But maybe Ken Feldman, as somebody who works closely with municipalities, or Shelley Cook or Bob Dyer as former council people, might comment on this one too. Any thoughts, Ken?
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. And some of us have been, I don't know if you're like watching, or maybe Barb can monitor, but some of us have been putting up the virtual raising of our hands as opposed to doing this and waving.
Oh, I see it there now.
Right.
I do see them now. So we have 3 more hands raised. So
Okay.
thank you.
All right. Well, so just I'll try to be brief here. And this may make it more complicated than it needs to be. Councilmember Simpson raised really 2 issues. One, what if there's an election dispute and we don't know by the next Monday? But also, maybe it's better to give newly elected council members a little bit more time to get prepared. So one of the things that I thought of was, what if we said, we picked a date? It could be the next Monday, or it could be the second Monday after the election, but then created a provision that said, unless if an election has not yet been certified, and to Nancy's question, I think we have a conflict now. I don't know what the answer would be. If we had an election that was not certified and it's the following Monday, do you swear that person in or do you not swear that person in? I don't think it's clear. So we could put a provision in that says, as soon as reasonably possible after the contested election is resolved. But I think then you create a new problem of what's the 4-year term, and does that person's term end when everybody else's council term ends, or does it end when the following Monday or 2 Mondays after the next election 4 years hence? So I'm not sure if that's the right way to go, but that's one possibility, to pick a date, but then provide, because even if we go 2 weeks out, if there's a contested election, we may not know even then. So that doesn't answer the question. It just provides a couple of other alternatives.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Bob Dyer?
This question has come up before. And I've always liked the idea of it being an immediate swearing in, from the standpoint that it limits the possibility of mischief being made. Not that I've ever seen any mischief done by council members, but if there was something that was rather controversial and there was a lot of time between an election and the next person comes in, something might get approved that perhaps wasn't a popular item. But it does bring up something else. I was going to bring up a question that people have been asking me about Arvada's elections, and that is, how come we don't have runoff elections? And if you have a runoff, then you have a question of, okay, when did those people get sworn in? And so I was going to bring up that issue of, do we ever have a provision for runoff? And I'm speaking as somebody who was elected 4 times, 2 times with a plurality and 2 times with a majority. So I could go either way, I guess. So I guess I was beneficiary of doing it either way, but that's something that I'd like us to think about as well. One thing I do know when it's come up before about runoffs is the cost, as well as obviously the delay.
Yeah, just a comment on that. I don't have the memo close at hand. I think it was done in 2001 in taking a look at the possibility of runoff elections. The cost is horrendous. It's like having a whole additional election. It's just not a simple thing to have a runoff for a single race. So it is expensive, and the council elected not to go with runoffs at that point after discussion. But so Brett Vernon, you've got something.
Thank you, Mr. McGough. As a general point of order, I'd really like to know if we are treading over ground that a previous committee has already worked their way through and decided, or if we are running the risk of overturning a decision that's been made in a previous charter review committee. So it would be helpful for me to know if this issue's already been looked at and decided at one time. My concern mirrors a bit of Mr. Dyer's concern. The delay to me makes sense, just to give time for everyone to get their ducks in a row and get themselves established. But it does leave a city council member in place that may have been removed or outvoted for a very good reason. My question is, how much damage can a single city council member do on their own in one meeting, maybe 2 meetings? Is that a significant risk, or is it almost zero risk?
Okay, any thoughts on that question from Brett?
For a single person, I suspect it wouldn't be a huge risk. Like I said, in all the years, and I've followed city council since probably the early 70s, and I don't recall it ever, well, of course, council members have always been sworn in so immediately, but I've never seen it really play out as being a significant issue in all those years. I think I recall county commissioners having, but of course there's usually only 3 county commissioners, so one could be a significant one. But I've seen county commissioners having extra time to get something done that maybe they had a pet project. In Arvada with 7 council members, it probably wouldn't be as big a risk.
One thought I've had related to this is that the agenda for the first meeting following the election is simply the swearing in and the designation of the mayor pro tem. and there's no business items conducted there. And the city staff, who usually prepares the agenda, schedules the agenda, obviously with the implicit consent of the council, since they adopt the agenda, it would be possible to just simply not schedule any weighty issues for 2 meetings if they wish to do that, so that in almost all cases the election would be settled within that period of time. But,
Mark, we have Mike with his hand up, and then we also have some great conversation going on in the chat. So I don't know if you can see the chat, but I can always read that out loud, or anyone is welcome to share after Mike.
okay, go ahead, Mike.
So as I was listening to Bob and reading Vanessa's idea, is very, very similar to my idea. I know council from time to time cancels a meeting or does not have a meeting every single Monday or as scheduled. Can that just be the first Monday after the election is just not a regular scheduled city council meeting? That gives 10 days, 13 days before the first scheduled meeting. I know it doesn't necessarily solve if there's a runoff election, but it would solve the fire hose that Councilman Simpson mentioned. You got 4 days to try to get up to speed on any issue that might be presented shortly after election.
Okay. And Ed Rothschild's comment is perhaps we could add language like boulders to talk about what we do with an unsettled election. And of course, it would seem that that would require also some additional language to say, is the previous council member's term expire with the election? Currently, the council member, the incumbent's term ends when the new incumbent's begins, a week or 6 days past the election. If we were to extend that and say it would go later, I think we would probably need some language to talk about when does the incumbent's incumbency end? When is that term over?
My sense would be that, and apologies, I turned off my video for a moment. We're getting ready for bedtime here on this end. But my sense is that we would just continue as is with the term, even in a contested election, even if you were sworn in late, your term still ends with the beginning, with the next election and the next inauguration.
Okay.
Mark, are you able to see the chat, or would you like me to address some of the conversations?
Why don't you address some of those?
Okay. So Vanessa says, could we simply change the language to blank meeting after the election results have been certified? This eliminates the issue of a contested election. And then Kristen, Katie has a question for you. Are counselors sworn in before an election is fully certified? How long does it take to certify in an uncontested election?
The certifications don't happen until the end of November. Since the introduction of provisional ballots, it takes quite a bit longer than it used to.
And then we have several people agreeing with Vanessa's idea. And Ed says, I like the existing first meeting language, but would add language like boulders to address unsettled elections. The start and end of the term would need to be addressed. And then Lisa says, random thought here, but I saw my work do this. She suggested maybe that we do a poll feature in Zoom, maybe for next meeting. We can discuss that instead of raising hands, whatever you're all most comfortable with. I can implement a poll to answer some of these questions if that works best. And then Preston says, point of order, are we going to be able to discuss all 8 topics tonight and get to any new topics that might involve further research?
Let me give a response to that. I doubt that we would go through all 8 tonight. In past years, when there's been the review, it's usually gone to a 3rd meeting. So I doubt that we would get through 8 of them in the next, we've not through 1 and we've got an hour left or so.
One thing that I wanted to throw out there as part of this discussion, just to kind of keep in mind, is City Council has to meet at least once per month. So if we're looking at any sort of gap between when the election occurs and swearing in, it's possible, or that when election results are certified, we would still need to be meeting in the meantime if it was in order to fulfill that requirement. The other practical consideration, not necessarily a legal one, but as a city staff member, I know, especially with all the stuff coming through my office, we often have a large number of contracts that come through at the end of the year. And so that'd be something else to consider in terms of frequency of meetings and whether or not we put off meetings until after election certification results.
So Rachel, I'm wondering if it might be, can you see that language might be constructed to say, yes, we're going to, first of all, the meeting, there does not have to be a meeting the Monday subsequent to the election.
Correct.
That could simply be, that could just simply be scheduled for 1 week beyond that. That could be an administrative thing or just a council decision. Yep. That would not have to be a charter thing at all.
That's correct.
But then could we say something, can you see that language might be constructed to on what we do in case there is a disputed election?
Yeah, I think we can incorporate something along those lines, just so that we're taking into account what occurs during the interim, what occurs between the election and the certification of the election results.
Okay, so the council could on its own decide not to have a meeting on the first Monday following the election. They could move that by a week or even 2 if they should choose to, as long as they meet once during that month of November. So then if we could have some language crafted that would talk about what to do in case of a disputed election. And because typically we operate with, in effect, a concession. People decide not to argue anymore when there's a significant change, a difference in the vote total. So we could have language, could you construct or craft some language that would say, this is what we do in case of a disputed election?
Yes, I can absolutely do that.
Okay. How would that work for people if we let the council decide when they're going to have the first meeting subsequent to the election, and then ask that the city attorney come back with some language to fit into the charter that would address what we do with disputed elections?
I'm in support of this.
Others?
Works for me.
Okay.
This is Sharon.
Okay, and so we would if we proceed this way, then we would have language to take a look at the next meeting, perhaps, or if meetings go beyond that, certainly before we finish our work. So would that be okay, Rachel?
That works.
Okay,
I
so
can come back next time with that language.
okay, so unless there's any problem with that, we will put that in the hands of the city attorney. Take a look at the issue of how we handle disputed elections. And we'll let the council worry about the schedule for the meetings subsequent to the election.
Mark,
Okay.
Vanessa has her hand up.
Okay, oh, I see it now. Yes. Go ahead, Vanessa.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds as though with those two things addressed, we still did not address the issue of someone who may have been elected out of or may not have received re-election, and what would happen with their ability to participate in meetings after the election before the next person is to replace them is certified or joins the meetings. And I'm not sure if we've addressed that so far.
Well, I'm thinking that that is something that the city attorney would take a look at in the language to talk about, in effect, the end of the term for the, how we handle that transition from one to the next at a time that there's a dispute on the election. Is that right, Rachel? Can you deal with that?
Yep, I can absolutely do that.
Okay. And Vanessa, would that address your concern? If she would bring back the language to us to take a look at?
Yes, sir.
And how we make that transition? Okay. Sounds good. Let's take a look at another issue. Okay. This is an interesting one, and I'm going to ask that Rachel speak to this. Basically it says all conveyances of interest in land by the city shall be signed by the mayor or mayor pro tem and attested by the city clerk under the seal of the city. Okay, Rachel, we've got it in our written material, but can you tell us again, what is the problem with that?
So, and it's not necessarily a problem, it's just not as efficient as I would like for it to be. So when we have language in our charter that says that all conveyances of an interest in land must be signed by the mayor or mayor pro tem, that requires that it receive council approval before we can actually make that happen. And that in and of itself, there's a lot of sorts of transactions where that absolutely makes sense and should be happening. So if we sold off a building that we owned or something like that, we're absolutely going to want to have city council approve that. But there are some things that were considered to be an interest in land that are much, much smaller in terms of their significance and effect on the city. And so for those smaller transactions, like if it's just an easement or a small lease or something like that, I would really love to have for city council to be able to have the flexibility to create a policy that is codified into our code that allows them to delegate authority for approval of some of those smaller transactions so that we can do those a little bit more efficiently. The reason that this came up is we had a couple of times in the past year where we were trying to grant an easement for like a utility or something like that, some very small interest in land. And we were trying to finish up a construction project, and that was a necessary piece of actually completing it. And we had a really hard time meeting all of our deadlines to complete the construction in a timely fashion, and also getting it to council to have it approved and move forward. So although it wasn't impossible, it's something that I think I would like for council to be able to have the ability to determine as part of our city code what their policy wants to be, on those particular issues. We've got a comment in the chat from Sharon. What is considered smaller? So for instance, we are redoing some of our lights, our traffic lights. And as part of that, sometimes we have to have a utility box next to the traffic light. And so we need an easement for a piece of land that is like 2 foot by 2 foot. And the easement means we don't have to own the property. We just want to have the right to have our utility box there. And so we're just looking at this tiny little piece of land. It may not be something that is so critical that council feels like they need to be the ones to approve it directly. They could, if we made this change, make the decision, put a code in place that says, okay, if it's more than 10 foot by 10 foot or how many over square feet that is, we want to see it, we want to approve it. Anything smaller than that, we're going to delegate to and then have a plan for that moving forward. So we had a good question in the chat, and this is a question that has come up a lot for us internally. Does the existing language require council approval or just the signature of the mayor? So my position on this has always been, and we have internal policies that kind of confirm this was the original intent, that the mayor does not have authority to approve anything outside of council's approval. So he doesn't have the independent authority to approve a sale of land or anything like that if council hasn't already approved it. So that's always been our position. Let's see. So Sharon had another question here, or aggregate along the street. I might need a little bit of clarification on that one. Sharon?
Yes, and thank you. I'm just thinking about, so if we have a long strip of what we are doing in terms of public improvements, and we're moving down the street, and at some point we have a piece of land that somebody disputes. I'm just wondering, you know, smaller, what does that mean in terms of like your example with the street lights and improving things? I just want to make sure that I have it clear in my head.
Yeah, and I think it was defining what the smaller transactions are that would be more efficiently delegated out would be something that city council would be able to decide. So we would have a process where they talk about, okay, from our perspective, what is important for our approval? And then really putting some guardrails around it so that as city staff, we know when we need to send it to council and when we don't. But that's a really good point. It's important to set those boundaries and to make it pretty clear. Any other thoughts or questions?
Ken has his hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, these are great questions. To me, when I read this was kind of low-hanging fruit. Some of the other examples that Rachel didn't mention, even a temporary construction easement, right? If we're widening a road in front of a city property, like if we were putting in another turn lane on Indiana in front of the city shops, and we needed to provide a temporary construction easement to grant the construction company the ability to store their equipment on city property, we couldn't start the project until council had a meeting and voted on it and authorized the mayor to sign it. So I completely understand, and I think it's valid to be concerned with, well, what's small and what's large? I tend to feel like we ought to trust the council to that, and the proposed language from staff is to have council create that by ordinance, which means as citizens, we will get to weigh in on that. They're not going to just do it without public comment. But if we try to if this group or any other group tried to come up with a list that these are the small things and these are the larger things that require council approval and mayor's signature on, and we do this one every 10 years, we're going to miss something. We're going to find out 3 years from now, oh, this is really small, but we didn't include it in this laundry list over here. So now we still have this problem. So I'm inclined to go with the staff recommendation on this, and I like the idea that whatever council does, it has to do by ordinance, which means when it's adopted or anytime it changes, we all have the right to have input into it.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Ken. I completely agree with those sentiments. I think those are all good points. Brett had a question. All of these transactions are agreed upon by all parties. So that they are. There are a lot of times where we get agreement. There are certain times where interest in land, we have to have it, say, for instance, if we're widening a road. And so we have to go through the condemnation process. But that wouldn't be something, we have to authorize that by ordinance. That authorization to condemn something has to go through city council, and I don't see that changing ever. So the only exception to that, where everybody has agreed to it, isn't going to be something that would be affected by this.
I would be very much in favor of this proposed change. We did something very similar, and I would just point out to you, intergovernmental agreements is another area that in the past has required council action. And what we put in the charter, I guess that was just, in 2011, the council may enter into intergovernmental agreements with other governmental entities for any lawful purpose, either by resolution or ordinance. City council shall adopt an ordinance that establishes a policy for the procedure for the adoption of intergovernmental agreements. That's what the charter says. So it takes care of everything related to intergovernmental agreements. And we did pass an ordinance that has several criteria on whether an intergovernmental agreement is approved by ordinance, which then of course involves a public hearing, or if it's minor and it can be approved by resolution without a public hearing. But that's in ordinance, and there's been public input to it, and it's worked out very well. And this would be a similar thing to say, let the council provide the guidelines, provide not just the guidelines, but provide the rules for these interest in lands. So. Does anybody have any objection to moving ahead with the proposed charter change? Okay, let's say that one is, we'll recommend that to council to make the change. And what's next, Kristen?
Mark, I do want to read quickly a comment from Katie. She says, I just want to be clear that everything we discuss here and recommend goes to the council first, but can only be put into action by the voters of Arvada. While this may make sense to us, I wonder about how this issue will be messaged on the ballot and the priority of placing this on the ballot. Land is a hot topic in Arvada.
And of course, that's a question that will, it'll be addressed first of all by the attorney's office with the language that goes to the council, but the council finally approves the language, the ballot language for if it's November election, the council will approve that language. So, there's be a lot of discussion about that. So I don't think we can say anything at this point of what that language will be. The council, the city attorney and the council will make that determination.
Mm-hmm. And I think part of what Katie's saying is likely that how do you explain this succinctly and persuasively to voters so that they understand why we're proposing it? And that's something that city council brought up as well. And I think it's a really good point. So we're gonna be coming up with language that hopefully meets those criteria and is persuasive to voters when they look at it, but that is always an issue.
Yeah, it should be noted, I think last time after the 2011, there were 6 or 7 issues that went to the ballot, and all but one were approved. All but one was approved at that time. So, and there were some, this particular one on intergovernmental agreements, people were able to understand that and gave the council the direction on that. So, but that's the key, is the language that will go on the ballot. And of course, that won't be our determination. That'll be finally the council's decision, what language to put on there. Okay, our next one has to do with the recall signature requirements.
Mark, can I ask a quick question about that past one before we move on?
Sure.
Okay, they do indicate a revision in the language that is being suggested, and I'd almost rather approve, you know, this is where we miss Don Allard saying the devil is in the details, but rather than approve a sort of general change, I'd rather recommend the particular language, and it was fine as specified here. Are you saying that this will be revised and what we're doing is sort of endorsing an idea?
No, I didn't mean to say that at all. I'm saying, yes, we would, my understanding is that we would be recommending this proposed charter language change to the council as it is here.
Excellent, thank you.
But to Katie's subsequent question, you know, how it's presented on the ballot and what the education effort is behind it, that will be the council. But this would be the language, that's my understanding, we'll recommend it in this way.
In addition, Mark, Vanessa thinks that it's important to explain what small land conveyances are, and including examples is key.
Yes. Yes, that will be in the explanatory language behind the charter amendment. So, okay, but we will recommend that specific language. Okay, here's a more complicated one, I think. And so, Rachel, can I call upon you to talk about this one?
Yes. So this particular issue came up as part of our part of this last recall situation. So we had a citizen who came to us and said that the language of the charter, this particular charter provision, was a little bit confusing when it came to identifying how many signatures they had to gather in order to successfully get a recall on the ballot. And so the question was, or the confusion was around saying that it's 25% of the registered electors voting for all the candidates. And this citizen's point was that no one registered elector can vote for all the candidates. And so that number is arguably 0. And when you multiply 25% by 0, that's also 0. So I went and looked at other charters and how they articulate this particular requirement. And most other charters in the surrounding municipality talk about it in terms of a % of the number of votes cast for all candidates for that particular office. So I feel like, you know, I think the language as is can reasonably be interpreted to mean that same thing, but to avoid any sort of confusion going into the future, I think it makes sense to propose a change that would really clarify this and make sure that everybody's on the same page in terms of the number of votes required.
So there's no change in intent. It still be the 25% of those who voted for the office in the last election. It's just the language saying the number of votes cast rather than, you know, the previous language.
Right.
Okay. Are there questions on that?
Yeah, Mark, this is Ed.
Okay, Ed, go ahead.
A general question, just so I'm sure I understand. The 25%, if it's a at-large council person, requires a higher hurdle for recall than for somebody in the district. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And is and I'm sort of a rhetorical question, is that by design? I mean, is that what the intent was?
So
My
my thought
guess-
on that, forgive me, is that it's not actually a higher hurdle because you have a larger pool of people to gather signatures from. So it's still that larger pool of people versus in a district, you have a much smaller pool of people because the other 3 districts can't sign against those counselors. So it's really the same bar to clear, except it might logistically take a longer period of time. I don't think it's meant to be harder. I think it's meant to be more equitable based on the pool of voters for that candidate or that official.
Okay, thanks.
And I think Nancy, you had a comment? Go ahead, Nancy. Nancy Young. Okay, are you there, Nancy?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
At last. I remember the comment that was made at the council meeting by the citizen who was bringing forth the recall effort. And what the citizen said is, we don't really think that recall is the right process for this particular issue, but rather petition and referendum would be the right process. But because petition and referendum is virtually impossible to achieve in Arvada, we're going the recall route. So to me, the real issue, there is an issue with that language, and I agree with that and have no problem with the proposed solution. But the real issue is the vast difference between the 2 requirements. In the case of recall, it's the number of votes cast in the most recent election for whatever seat is in question. For petition and referendum, it's a percentage of the total registered voters in Arvada. And to give perspective, the total registered voters in Arvada, the last time I looked, was something like 85,000. And I'm just going to pick, for example, a number out of the air. And let's say it's 10%. That's 8,000 signatures. Whereas the total votes cast in the last election was somewhere in the vicinity of, I believe, 35 or 40,000, which would then make the referendum process 4,000 signatures. And by the way, so the 2 processes have vastly different hurdles. In both cases, the hurdles are quite high. And I noticed that in one of the documents, it was stated that you can always hire people to gather signatures. However, if you're a citizen group trying to raise funds for that kind of an effort, it's almost impossible. And so I think that there needs to be some equalization.
Nancy, excuse me. I think you're just anticipating one of the issues that is yet to be discussed, and that is the. Oh. So we will be looking at that specific question about the equity between the 2 processes, recall and.
I apologize.
Yeah. So you're just.
I thought the 2 were to be considered together.
I'm not sure in which order it is, but we will get to that particular point because your concerns are very valid, and they're just a little bit early on this one. So
okay, well, thanks for your tolerance.
Okay, and we'll get there. Okay, so any other thoughts on just a change in the language here to make it absolutely clear what we're talking about?
So maybe
Just this is Preston. If I can clarify, the math I think that was just described by Nancy, just so I'm clear, if it's 25% of an at-large seat, and there was between 35 and 40,000 votes cast, then we would really be talking about 25% hurdle would mean 10,000 signatures. Is that correct?
Yes,
okay.
That's right.
And so is there a suggestion of not only the clarification, but also of reducing the hurdle in that sense?
That issue is not before us. All we're being asked here for is a clarification of the language. At least that issue has not been brought to us to make any change in what that hurdle might be.
For the issue at hand before us, I support the change recommended by the city attorney simply because it clarifies the language to prevent potential legal action from a citizen because of a misinterpretation of the intent of the language.
Okay. Any other thoughts on Lauren's comment there? Would everybody be comfortable in recommending this proposed charter language change to the council? Any objections?
I'm good.
Okay. Let's go ahead with that one then. We'll, okay. And here's an interesting one that we dealt with in 2011. No council member, including the mayor, shall be a salaried employee of the city nor any other municipality during his/her term of office. And the proposed change is to say no council member, including the mayor, shall be a salaried employee of the city during his or her term of the office. So it's excluding that other municipality and just saying not of the city of Arvada during the term of office. Rachel, do you want to speak to this one?
Sure. So we did some research on this. The city attorney's office did about 10 years ago. And at the time, a lot of the law on this particular issue was pretty straightforward in that courts didn't like seeing restrictions on people holding elected office or being a candidate for elected office. Since in the last 10 years, the case law has changed a bit so that courts are making a distinction between how strictly they want to govern restrictions on candidacy for elected office and restrictions on holding an elected office. So I think the bar has gone a little bit lower on restrictions like this because you can run for mayor or for council if you're an employee in another city. You would just have to quit that job once you held the office. So that being said, the law is far from clear on whether or not this is a permissible restriction. So we do run some risk from a legal perspective in keeping that kind of a restriction on employment in another municipality in our charter. So that was the logic behind the proposal last time around. And was that, Mark, remind me, was that 2001 or 2011? I always get those mixed up.
That was 2011.
Okay. And it was not approved by voters, and it was not approved by a relatively large margin, right?
Right at 2-1, 16,000 to 8,000. It was disapproved.
Right. So we proposed it last time, but voters did not agree that it was a change that they wanted to see. So it's, I don't know, I'm curious to hear what everybody thinks about this, even though the law is not a model of clarity on this particular issue.
I'd like to add just a little more before we get into the discussion too. somebody can be working for the recreation district, the fire district, county government, being a state employee, whatever, and be a council member. This prohibition is just for another municipality. And, it's when Chris Daly, as our city attorney, looked at this 10 years ago, basically he said his judgment was, his legal opinion was that it would be indefensible as a constitutional issue to prohibit somebody by a category of employment when there are very somewhat similar situations that would not prohibit somebody from being a council member. So it's a difficult one to sell, as it was to the public 10 years ago, to the citizens 10 years ago. But just so, as Rachel asked for, other thoughts on this? Shelley, you've got your hand up there.
Ken had his hand up first, Mark.
Well, okay. Ken is saying, go ahead, Shelley.
Right, well, I'd be interested in his take on it, but what I will say is I respect the sort of common sense view that the residents or citizens took on this one. You could identify areas of conflicts and try to delineate that and act around it, but there may be things that you can't. I was thinking of examples. So say somebody works at Denver Water, and we work with Denver Water, but we're also sometimes adversaries, and it may be that you can prevent them from voting on something, but their knowledge, the knowledge they have of city needs and influences, maybe that gets carried into their work, and there's no clear way to draw a boundary around that. A land use planner, even if they recuse themselves from a vote on an item that somehow is defined as a conflict, they still see the annexation agreement, I think. So I just thought it's hard to draw that boundary. We have a sort of safe harbor. I wondered whether this would help us in court if we were challenged, having had the citizens say 2-1 that they want to retain the prohibition. Does that give us a little bit of a place to argue our case from? And then the other thought I had was that somebody who works for a competing municipality may gain some leverage over individuals that they work with in the city because of their influence in the competing municipality. I was just thinking of different circumstances, but anyway, I want to hear what other folks have to say as well.
Okay, go ahead, Ken.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Shelley. Good comments. I have always thought this is nuts. This is just makes no sense to me. When it was put in the charter years and years and years ago, it may have been impossible to work 30 miles away and live in Arvada, or 50 miles away. But basically what this says is, you could be the county attorney in Jefferson County or the county attorney in Broomfield and have what arguably would be constant conflicts of interest, or an employee at Apex. Or you could be a park maintenance worker in Bennett. And if you lived in Arvada, you were not qualified to run for city council. But you could if you were the county attorney in Jeffco. To me, that's nuts. It's insane. And I think, Shelley pointed out, is there possibility for influence? Is there possibility for conflict? We can take that pretty far away. Some of my neighbors, some friends of mine, one of whom works in the Arvada Community Development Department, and one of whom works in the Westminster Community Development Department. Do we have a problem with that? I don't think so. To me, to punish someone from serving in public office because of who their employer is problematic. And I will tell you, as an attorney who served on council, there are periodically where I would have to recuse myself because I had a client or a former client that had business before the city. And my practice is not Arvada specific. I know that two of my mayoral colleagues, Mark Williams and Bob Free, have much more an Arvada specific law practice, and they had to recuse themselves more frequently than I did. But it goes to the good faith of the elected official to identify those conflicts and to not participate at the right time. And it certainly is within the purview of the council to require one of their colleagues to recuse themselves. So one more point I wanted to make on this, because as Mark pointed out and our staff pointed out with the information we got, this got crushed by the voters. So it kind of goes to Katie's point earlier as to how do you get the word out on these things if council decides to put these on the ballot, some of which may be very self-explanatory. I thought this one was 10 years ago, but what do I know, right? So council is not going to spend and can't spend legally public dollars to support an issue on the ballot. But once it gets put on the ballot, if any of us believe strongly in these issues, we can certainly create an issues committee to promote a position on issues that are on the ballot. And I would suggest to all of us, and I would be willing to do it, and I hope there are others who would be willing to work with me if there are important issues, maybe we ought to take it upon ourselves when our work here is done and council does their job. And if we have now issues that are being put forward to the voters to amend the charter, that we try to create some citizen support through social media or otherwise to educate people as to why these things are important. And to me, it just, I haven't even addressed the legal issues, and I won't, other than to say, I don't think, Shelley, the last vote helps us. If we were to go to court, I think a judge is going to look at, is it constitutional or is it not constitutional? I don't care what the voters said, just like courts have said that with oil and gas regulations that exceed the boundaries as to what the state says that local governments can do. So I think it's unconstitutional, but I just think as a policy matter, it's crazy. And I think we should, I think we should recommend changing it as we did last time. And I am willing to learn from the mistake that some of us made last time and not put more effort into trying to educate our fellow citizens as to, what this issue is going forward.
Hey, Bob Dyer.
I think I'm probably be a bit redundant with Ken. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't have this language changed so that an employee of the city of Arvada can't be a council person, because I think that's pretty obvious. But about the most serious conflict I can think of would be somebody who might be in economic development in a neighboring city that might find out that somebody is interested in putting something in Arvada that could be really good if they could get it in their city. But I think that would be so unusual and so rare, because based on my experience, usually an economic development project doesn't get known to the council members until it's pretty far along. And so I think the key thing would be making sure that it's very clear that if there's a conflict between the person's duty as a council member and whatever their job might be for some other city, that there are boundaries, and they can't cross those boundaries without serious penalty. That's the only thing I could see that maybe we need to get across to citizens that would vote on this. You don't have to worry about, hopefully, about somebody having a conflict that they will benefit from, because I think that there is no reason we should have this provision in the charter.
Okay. Others?
Hello, thank you. I've enjoyed living in the city of Arvada since 2004, and I've always wanted to become active on city council. However, this provision prevents me from doing that because my entire career I have spent in public service. So, except for maybe a couple of years with Excel Energy. But yeah, I currently now work for a very large, well, not a very large, it's a small but large municipality here on the Front Range. And this has prevented me from being more active and being a city council member. But the position that I have in this municipality has, it's workplace safety. It's not like I could do anything. I would have any influence in any other way. So I am very much in support of this change because it does, I mean, I support what former Mayor Feldman said is I'm not gonna work more than so many miles away and make a living, but still want to be engaged with the city of Arvada. So for me, I support this change.
I just wanted to add to, in going through a lot of this case law, one of the things that courts would bring up relatively frequently was that voters could make a decision about whether a conflict is too great. And so that was one check and balance on the process. So if it was a parks worker and they didn't think the conflict was that big, voters can make the choice that this is okay, we're okay electing this person. But if it was someone else who had policy-making authority in another city where, you know, we have a dispute, then voters could also decide, no, that conflict is too great. So in addition to conflicts of interest rules, that might be a way to sell it.
Well, there seems to be pretty general agreement from the chat and from most of those who have spoken that we should recommend this proposed change in language. Is that an accurate reading? Shelley, you were one of those who spoke on the other side of this issue. What's your thought at this point? Shelley, are you with us?
I thought I was unmuted. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you for asking.
Okay.
You know, Mark, and it wasn't exactly the case of an employee, but I guess I would point out that the first mayor of Arvada ended up moving to Westminster and became the first mayor of Westminster and came back to Arvada, and the citizens still in both cities elect him back and forth. You know, I think the citizens can be trusted to be able to figure out if somebody's got a conflict in their city.
Good example. And then he went on to the school board too, and a few other elected offices beyond that. So.
No, I did not know the person personally, for those that are wondering.
And just, Mark, to give you a
Nor did I.
I was thinking it though, Bob.
To give you a more recent example, it was just a few years ago that there was a Thornton City Council member who was the Denver fire chief. And he was a good fire chief and he was a good council member. And both communities benefited from his service, and Arvada can benefit from that as well.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we do have consensus to forward this to the council, recommending, or, you know, recommending the change that is proposed before us.
Mark, Vanessa wants to add something.
Go ahead, Vanessa.
I do have a question. It's pretty great discussion right now and pretty unanimous, but what I'm really wondering why this was rejected by voters in 2011. What went wrong? What was it, the messaging? Was it the language? Why are we pretty in consensus here and it makes perfect sense, and yet it was rejected by a 2-to-1 vote just 10 years ago?
Well, I don't remember specifically. I think probably as Ken said, and he's ready to add some more here, I think it's just failure to message this correctly. But it was strange because there were a half a dozen issues referred to the voters. They approved everyone by substantial majority except this one. went down in flames. So Ken?
Yeah, what my recollection is, Vanessa, there was no campaign at all supporting any of the charter changes. It was just, we all thought they were pretty straightforward, and we're going to throw them out there for voters to look at. When you talk about conflict of interest, that kind of raises red flags anyway. And I mean, to me, the thing that was crazy is that, all right, well, if you think that no other cities, you can't work for other cities, what about counties? How come they're not on the list, right? There's special districts, but it was never, there was no discussion about it. And the lesson I learned from that experience is that if we're going to do this again, we need to do a better job of educating the public.
And Shelley?
Yeah, I'd just say two things. One is, yeah, if you're talking about making a change, and I think people tend to be conservative if it is unclear what it does. So they may more likely say no if they're not clear, if they're talking about changing an existing thing. The second thing, though, I'd say is, and when I referred to common sense, it may be a concern about divided loyalties and who they really will need to be acting on behalf of. You know, are they split between two allegiances? Do they have agency or fiduciary duty for two different entities? Is the only guess, but we really don't get any feedback. You know, people just vote and you see the result.
Okay, but you had indicated earlier, Shelley, that you were okay with forwarding this on to the council with the recommendation for the change in language?
Yeah, it looked like it was pretty strong consensus otherwise. I wouldn't personally like it, but I don't feel so strongly about it that I wouldn't agree with this on a consensus basis.
Okay. Okay, then we will go ahead and forward this on to council with a recommendation to for the proposed change in language. We're at about 7:40. We have about 20 minutes left. Preston has raised issues, or in the chat, he's indicated he would like some issues to be looked at, and perhaps we should do that next so that if there are some that we want to move ahead with, we'll get that direction before the end of this meeting.
Hey, Mark, can I point of order?
Sure.
I mean, we've got a large group here, and I think perhaps many of us have some suggestions that we want to bring forward. My understanding was if we had an issue that we wanted to look at, we were going to have staff look at it and kind of do a pro and con, just like we have in the materials, and then we get it for a future meeting. Without even looking at Preston's issues, I'm happy considering all of them, but I'd like to have that kind of pro and con. And what I was hoping for the last at least 15 minutes is we see what other sections of the charter that other commission members might want to also ask staff to look into and have us talk about when we, at the next meeting, we get through this list of the council issues.
Yeah, I think we're thinking the same there, Ken. Thinking that with the comments that came up here, that with Preston's saying that he would just introduce these so that we would get that, and then if others have issues that we want to be looked at, if they can state those clearly, then that will give some direction to the city attorney. But yeah, I don't envision that we will discuss those issues at this meeting. That make sense? Just to introduce them.
Yeah, given that we have 15 or more, slightly more than that minutes before 8 o'clock, do you want to kind of poll the group and see who else has things they want to add to the list to ask staff to look into?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, we can do that. So I think Nancy had an issue that she may want to present to us. Preston?
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay.
Shall I?
Hang on just a minute. Let's see how many others have issues. You can raise a hand or give. Okay, so Ken and Preston and Nancy as some issues, and Katie have, and Bob. Okay. Okay, well, let's see if we can get through those very quickly so we can give some direction to staff to bring us back some information. So Nancy had mentioned, she had brought this up first, so let's start with Nancy. Nancy, what section of the charter would you like us to look at?
Oh, I do not recall right off the top of my head the particular section, but I think the city attorney will find it quite quickly. I get a lot of feedback from a lot of citizens who feel they're not being represented, and I think the committee really needs to explore this. And one comment that people keep making to me is that the combination of the current structure of council seats, which is at large, 3 at large, 4 in the district, combined with term limits, creates a situation that discourages diversity and a constant flow of new and fresh perspectives to deal with the new issues that keep coming up. And what people have pointed out is that this system enables one person with one viewpoint to serve a lifetime on council. You can serve in a district seat for 12 years. When you're termed out, you can then run for an at-large seat and serve for up to 12 years. That's 24 years. And then when you're termed out, you could run for mayor for another 12 years. That's 36 years. And you could then repeat the process all over again and literally die in office. And a lot of folks feel that this is really not appropriate and it's not fair. And they said, the feedback I keep getting is there should be a term that a single individual would sit out, and then if they want to come back and run again, that's great. When the council addressed the issue of term limits, excuse me, they made a couple of comments. First of all, the first term is a steep learning curve. I get that. Currently the best mayoral candidates are those who are already serving because they know the ropes. And the third concern was a smaller council. It's easier to get things done and avoids clicks. Of course, that particular comment kind of bothered me because it kind of suggests a desire to avoid controversy, which is really the key to representative democracy. So as a way to address, as one potential solution, and maybe others have another idea, it's just not right to enable a lifetime on council. And so what I would suggest is that any one person can serve up to 16 years contiguously in any seat during those 16 years. At the end of that, they sit out for one term of 4 years, and then after the pause, can serve again in any seat.
Okay.
But it's a suggestion.
Well, let me ask very quickly, is it consensus of this group that we want the city staff to explore this issue?
Hey, Mark.
Yeah, Ken? Go ahead.
I respectfully disagree with Nancy, but I'm fine having staff look at it. I mean, I think we should all be able to bring forth our issues, have staff look into it, and then provide us information that we as a full group can consider at a subsequent meeting. So I would almost prefer not to vote on whether we want staff to look into it. I think anybody who has something they want staff to look at ought to have the ability to do that.
I agree. I'm not quite sure why 16 years as opposed to 12, but I would like to at least have that looked at.
Okay, I'm certainly open to accepting Ken's suggestion that we just move ahead with that. So, Rachel, are you all set with that? To take a look at what some other city charters have to say and looking at some options for us?
Yep,
Okay.
I put that on the list.
Okay, and Ken, I think you're next.
Yeah, okay, I've got a couple of, I took Barb's recommendation to heart, which was you don't have to do a lot of work to prepare for this. And now that I've done that, I think I should have called Rachel and asked her about this beforehand. But I'm just going to throw out a couple of the two issues I have with section 8 of the charter, which deal with the city attorney and the municipal judge. 8.1 seems to say that city council gets to appoint special counsel. And you know, full disclosure, like I said, I do some work for the city, so I've been special counsel to the city. I know some cities, they can't hire outside counsel unless the elected officials vote on it. Many cities can do it if the city attorney thinks it's a good idea. The city attorney reports back to the council. If the council thinks the city attorney is making bad decisions, they take that up with the city attorney. I personally think that's a better way to go. I don't know if that's been a problem, Rachel, but I would suggest that we look at that. And then for 8.1 and 8.2, dealing with the city attorney and the municipal judge, we have a provision with the manager that says that council can't interfere with city manager employees. And there's a good reason for that. And I think any of us who have been involved in this support that. The manager reports to the council. They don't like the manager's employees. They bring it up with the manager. I think we ought to have a similar provision for the city attorney's employees and the municipal court employees. There have been times, I know in this city and in other cities, where somebody has not liked the opinion that one of the assistant city attorneys or deputy city attorneys have offered. And I think it's up to the city attorney to decide who she wants to hire in her office and what they're going to say. If the council doesn't like that, they bring it up with her, but they don't get to say, you got to fire this person or you need to make them change their opinion. So I'm just wondering, Rachel, if you think it's worth looking into whether we impose the same restriction on interfering with city attorney and municipal court employees as we do with city manager employees. If you don't think it's a big deal, I'm happy to drop it.
You know, I don't think it hurts to talk about it. I am incredibly fortunate to have a city council that does that anyway. You know, I feel like they respect my decisions and my choices, and as long as I'm keeping them informed and communicating, it hasn't been an issue yet. I've only been the city attorney for a year, so that, you know, maybe a different city council in the future, it's more of an issue. But I think you raise a good point, and it doesn't hurt to look at it. So I'm happy to put together some thoughts and compare it to other cities and all that kind of stuff that the committee can discuss.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Preston, you had an issue.
You know, I outlined a few topics in the chat room, and Rachel has acknowledged those topics already that she noted. I just described one about the comparative chart on the initiative and referendums to get some clarity there. The second one was about the recall threshold we touched on earlier. And then the third one was the possibility or comparison of other jurisdictions that have an ombudsman or ombudsperson position within the city.
Okay, and you're okay with those, Rachel? Okay.
Yeah, I can definitely put together some information and get that to you guys.
Okay. And Katie?
Hi. Ken Feldman, I was thinking along the same lines as you. I think it's interesting that as part of our conversations, we're talking about the residency of the judge. And I was just wondering, you know, as I understand it, the city council picks the city manager, the city attorney, and the judge. So instead of looking at the residency requirement of one person, I was wondering, do we look at all three of the people that are selected because I would hate to see a variance. I think, and by the way, Rachel, I don't know where you live. I have no clue where the judge lives, and
I do live here, so it's no big issue with me.
I just think that again, thank you. Like, I really don't, as I was doing my homework and reading through, I was like, well, this is interesting to pull out one person, but to look at the 3 people that are chosen by our council, and I'm wondering if it's of interest to this group, why not just discuss that in terms of the 3 people that are chosen by our city council members as one block, instead of saying, well, this person doesn't have to, whatever our choices are, I think we should look at those cohesively instead of one position at a time.
I think that makes a huge amount of sense. And I always joke with people internally that there's a residency requirement in the charter for the presiding municipal court judge and for the city manager, but the city attorney wrote the charter. So he or she didn't write in a residency requirement for them. I am contractually required to live in the city, and I also live in the city by choice, love it here. But yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to make it consistent. It also makes it easier for us internally when I'm trying to mentally remember, okay, what are the requirements? In terms of residency for appointees, it makes sense to have them all similar.
And I just want to add to that, I also respect, and I tell everybody I can, that the city manager, he hires everyone underneath him, including our chief of police and some of our biggest departments, like, public works, and et cetera. So thank you for, if everyone's up with that, I just felt like that was an interesting thing to discuss, is what that looks like. So thanks for being so open to the suggestion. If there's any thoughts from the group, I'd love to hear them. But I was doing my homework last night and I read that, and I just caught me, and I would really think it'd be an interesting conversation.
Good, thank you. And Bob?
Yeah, I would like to at least have the information on runoff elections. How much time would be required from a general election to a runoff, and the cost to be able to have a firm answer. I'll go back to the fact that, like I said, 2 of my elections I won on pluralities. The first one I ran, I think I probably had about 40% of the vote, 45. And the third election I ran, there were 4 of us, and I had 1/3 of the vote. It just makes, I'm glad I didn't have to run in a runoff. But on the other hand, it makes me a little uncomfortable that if you get into there's going to be some open seats. We know that in the next election. If you have 5 or 6 people or 7 people run for mayor, and the person wins with 20% of the vote, does he or she really represent the people of Arvada? I don't know. That's what makes me kind of nervous.
I actually agree with you, Bob. I also won with a plurality, about 45, 46%, something like that. And this was something that I thought as well, that perhaps if it makes financial sense for the city and timing and everything, runoffs might be a good idea, just to make sure that voters truly make sure their voices are heard through and through.
Okay, Rachel, you've got one more there. Okay, and Shelley.
I don't have another one to add, but I wanted to make a suggestion, or just put this out there for process. As we discuss, especially as we get into some of the more meaty issues here, would it make sense and sort of allow for not fuller or longer, but a balanced discussion? If when you were asking for input, we kind of followed the discussion in the handouts, where they say, here are the arguments against, and here are the arguments for, and here are the arguments against, and invite people on either, to contribute their views on either one of those, so that we at least sort of took this view of taking, or of looking at both sides of the issue as we make these decisions. So I just wanted to put that out there as a way to structure discussion for the next ones.
And how would you see that working, Shelley?
Well, the way the handouts are really pretty good, because they say arguments for and arguments against. And just kind of following that as a template, I would invite people who are on the positive side to offer their comments, and then invite people on the other side for their comments. And then you could, have the discussion flow from there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm no problem with that. Yeah, and these, of course, were just, either drafted by me or drafted by somebody on the staff, and just quick thoughts to get our processes moving. So, but I understand what you're saying, or maybe we can do that next time. Okay, well, we are at about 3 minutes to our projected time. So I think we'll call a halt to things for this evening, and then next time we'll pick up on the issues that the council has referred to us, and we'll see what the city attorney's office or other staff bring back to us for consideration next time.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
Yeah, one quick fun fact I forgot to mention earlier, just real quick. We're still going to end by 8, especially for those of you who are relatively newer to Arvada. After Saddam Hussein was toppled in Iraq, there were U.S. forces that helped them set up their local government. They never had set up a local government. And there's an organization called the Metro Mayor's Caucus in Metro Denver. And some of the staff from the Metro Mayor's Caucus went to Iraq with former state representative and former Glendale Mayor Joe Rice, who's a lieutenant colonel in the Army. And when they got back, I served as mayor when Joe was mayor of Glendale. And he told me that a significant part of the Baghdad City Charter is based on the Arvada City Charter. So I just want you to know that when we're done with whatever changes we made, we're going to send John Marriott to Baghdad so that he can update the Baghdad Charter.
Actually, can I go? I did my thesis on Iraq.
But you can only go to Canada, Lauren.
Okay. And Ed, did you have something yet? Okay. Okay. Barb?
Yeah. Does everyone care if I take a quick screenshot of the group here? Okay, ready? Awesome.
Okay.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll adjourn, and we'll meet on February 25, 6 o'clock once again. Thank you all very much. Thanks to the staff for all the work that they've done in preparing for us, and thank you for all your input and for your thoughtful attention throughout this 2 hours. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks. Great input,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone. And thank you, Mark.
Thanks.